Hey everyone, this is Randy. Thanks for joining me for this edition of E3 Minutes for Life. It's going to be one of the more sobering, one of the more somber places I've ever been. I'm standing in front of the Dachau concentration camp from World War II, and we just spent a couple of hours touring this and hearing about, reading about, learning about the atrocities that were committed here. And I absolutely no way, shape, or form am going to try to compare what happened here to what happened in the workplace. But one thing that I did see over and over, hear over and over, and I've read it about other wars and other terrible people, evil people, when they were going through wars or times when they were trying to put people groups into a specific corner or exterminate them or whatever. One of the things that they tried to do was to erase hope. You know, when you have no hope, it's hard to keep going. And I think in the workplace, there are times when people get hopeless that their life is going to get any better in their work. You know, they resign themselves to the idea that whatever job they have is what it's always going to be. They're always going to be at the same level. They're never going to be able to move ahead. They're never going to be able to climb out, whatever you want to call that. They're always going to be under the control of someone else, or they're going to have less money than someone else. And I just want to encourage you, be someone who brings hope to others. You know, be someone who in your job and in your work, you really strive to encourage other people. You help them to see the best in their situation. You talk about the good. Yeah, I would encourage you, empathize with other people. Understand that their life is different than yours, that their challenges are different than yours. And that's not to say that theirs are necessarily worse than yours, but they're just dealing with something different than you are. Look for ways that you can help them to grow. Look for ways that you can help them to find a connection to other people. Look for ways to give them a hope that what is to come is going to be better than what they've already experienced, that their best years are not necessarily behind them. You know, we could never imagine what it would be like to live in a place like this. Over 40,000 people killed here. There's a crematorium we just visited right down that way where they actually, burn the bodies. People just tortured in unbelievable ways. Again, I'm not even trying to say that what somebody is going through in the American workplace can even compare to this. But I do know that once you lose hope, the circumstances around you aren't as important, aren't as weighing as the fact that you have nothing to look forward to. I also hope that you'll be a person who will look for ways to find hope in the world that's around you. Not just based on other people, not based on a raise, not based on an office or the kind of computer that you have or the position that you hold or the title that's been given to you, but somebody who just looks at the world as a place that we can try to make better. If we can make it through what is today, that tomorrow will be better than today was. And in that way, you can become a glimmer of hope for other people around you. So again, from a very terrible place near Munich, Germany, where I've just experienced something I've never walked through before, and only through videos and recordings and things like that. This is Randy, and I hope that this edition of E3 Minutes for Life will cause you to think about how you can bring hope to others. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Hey everyone, this is Randy. Welcome to this edition of E3 Minutes for Life, the extra mile. Again, as I've done on a previous video, I want to let you know up front, this is going to be an extra mile E3 Minutes, which means it's going to be biblically based and it's going to be Christian based. So if that's not for you, you're welcome to turn it off, but if you want to run with me, let's run the extra mile. I just did a video standing in front of Dachau. This is the very first concentration camp, from what I could read and understand, the very first concentration camp that the Germans opened in 1933. And this became the blueprint, it became the pattern for all the rest of them. And I talked about in that other E3 Minutes for Life, what happens when people take hope away from someone else. And needless to say, in a concentration camp, most of the people were pretty hopeless. They didn't really feel like they would ever get out. Thousands and thousands and thousands died in places like this, hundreds of thousands, all in the name of politics and so-called religion. But I want you to know that when we as Christians, when we as believers look at life, no matter what our circumstances are, we never have to be hopeless because we know that we have the hope of salvation. But I think there are times when some Christians think about that as just salvation and eternity. I think God wants to give us hope for today. Jesus said He came He might give life and give it more abundantly. He didn't just say then and there. He's talking about here and now. And when we talk about the hope that we profess, there's got to be more to that than just, I hope that when I die I don't burn. I want to know that there's a hope for people who live here, that they can make it through the challenges of the day. I want to know that there's hope, that people around me care about me. But you can be that hope for other people by reflecting Christ's love to them in the way that you live, the way that you do your job, the way that you act with your neighbors, your family, and things like that. So as we look at having hope, we also hear these three remain: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. Well, I think if we have faith, we can have hope. Hebrews 11 says faith is the assurance of what we hope for and the certainty of what we do not see. So I don't know what your circumstances are right now, but I know if you're a believer, God wants good for you in your life. That doesn't mean God wants ease. That doesn't mean God wants comfort. I'm not portraying that. But I do think He wants what's good for you. And you can hold out hope that in the end, He is in control. Thanks for joining us for this edition of E3 Minutes, The Extra Mile, and we'll see you next time.